someone who assaulted a police officer, admitted their guilt, got convicted, got pardoned, and now we're going to pay them for that? That's absurd. The American people are going to reject this out of hand. When you take money from me to give to a purpose that I vehemently disagree with, that's tyranny, and that's what that account is.
Stupid on stilts. I'm going to use that one going forward. But that is not the only thing Capitol Hill and the White House are disagreeing on at this very moment. Lawmakers have already nixed the administration's $1 billion request for White House security. That request includes funding for Trump's ballroom. All of this appears to point to a potential widening rift between the president and many Republican lawmakers on the Hill. The president was asked about that gap earlier today, and here's what he said.
Are you losing control of the Senate Republicans?
I don't know. I really don't know. I can tell you I only do what's right. I don't need money for the ballroom. I'm making a gift of the ballroom.
He doesn't need money? Then why is he asking for so much? Now let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel tonight. Peter Baker, Theo's dad, is here, chief White House correspondent for The New York Times. Susan Glasser, Theo's mom, staff writer for The New Yorker, is here. And Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney who spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor, joins us. Mr. Baker, we turn to you first. I want to begin with what we just heard from President Trump. What did you make of him saying that he doesn't really know if he has control over Senate Republicans?
Well, that may actually be a pretty straightforward answer. He may not know, because, in fact, it does look pretty, odd to see Senate Republicans standing up quite so straightforwardly against Trump priorities, things that Trump has made clear are very important to him. Now, that doesn't mean that they're in the end going to ultimately block him. We'll have to see. We've seen multiple times before where Republicans on the Hill make some noise over some controversy or another, and ultimately at the end of the day, the president still gets his way. And he's shown as recently as this week with that primary in Kentucky that he still has real control over the base, real control in effect over the Republican Party, and made very clear in ousting Congressman Tom Massey what he's willing to do to Republicans who dare to defy him. But it may be that this $1.8 billion for his allies and the immunity from past audits or audits from his past taxes is just a bridge too far. We'll have to wait and see.
That's what I want to get into. Why this? Why now? Senators Cassidy and Tillis were not totally surprised. They're not returning to their jobs. They can afford to buck the president. But enough Republicans were so concerned that John Thune canceled votes today. And there's also a bipartisan effort in the House to block the weaponization fund from happening at all. Susan, why do you think this is the issue that became the line in the sand?
Well, I mean, look, the timing is everything. And Donald Trump, in this political moment, he seems to have almost made a choice, Steph, between getting revenge in Republican congressional primaries and in getting what he wants on Capitol Hill. He chose revenge. That's probably not surprising from someone who told us on the campaign trail that if he was reelected, he would be all about revenge and retribution. What's remarkable is that Trump has gotten away with it in some respects for so long because Republicans have very narrow majorities as it stands in both the House and the Senate, even narrower in the House in many respects than in the Senate. And Trump has basically sort of said, well, I dare you. Come and get me if you can. And again and again and again, even Senate Republicans who talk in a more independent way than House Republicans have sort of crumpled when faced with that challenge up until now. I find it remarkable. We're hearing reports from Capitol Hill today that as many as 24 Republican senators were quite angry and heated in confronting the acting Attorney General, Trump's former personal lawyer, as he tried to explain what this $1.8 billion fund is going to be all about. And, look, these people attacked the U.S. Capitol itself on January 6th. I mean, I do think that, when all is said and done, we tend to forget this. I would call this the January 6th presidency. Republicans went ahead and opted for Trump even after he unleashed this mob of people on the U.S. Capitol. And I think we're now seeing, Republicans still squirming and squeamish about the price they paid for taking back power in this country.
All right. I think something was remarkable that I saw today from the New York Times, an op-ed. And they put it the following way, quote, "This fund would institutionalize that ethical disaster. Forget the one-off deals or the handshakes at the 18th hole. This would make cronyism an official function of the federal government, a U.S. agency for corruption." End quote. Joyce, what's your take? That I found remarkable.
You know, it is remarkable, Steph, but it's not unwarranted because the money that we're talking about here, this pool of funds that's being pulled on, is the judgment fund, something that the Justice Department needs to pay claims that are brought against it. And the idea that that money could just be siphoned off and used as reward money, if not worse, for Trump's allies, for his cronies, for his supporters, it is really by definition the notion of becoming a banana republic. The most interesting aspect of this issue, with just opposition breaking out overall in the Senate, is that Congress actually could do something about this. Congress, which created the Judgment Fund, could simply pass a measure or put a rider into a bill, frankly, that limits the use that the money in the Judgment Fund can be put to and excludes Trump's newest plan. So this is up to Congress, no matter how you look at it.
Joyce, 2 law enforcement officers that were attacked on January 6th, they are suing to block the fund. And I want to share what one former officer, Harry Dunn, had to say about it.
The pardons that Donald Trump gave January 20th of 2025, that was a forgiveness. Hey, we forgive you for what you did in my name, the violence. We pardoned you. Now these payments, I believe, serve as a reward and also an incentive to say, you know what, look what they did, and now they're getting paid for it. Donald Trump has our back. And you know what, if we stand with him, not only will he forgive us and we won't get in trouble, but we could potentially be rewarded for us. And we believe that's also some of the argument that we're making that gives us standing.
Joyce, what is your read on the officer's lawsuit? Because that kind of aligns with the Washington Post reporting that January 6 rioters and George Santos are eyeing this money.
Yeah, so many people will be eyeing this money. It's a big pool of money. And of course, money is in many cases the source of political corruption. You know, there will be efforts to block the use of this fund. There's no doubt. As I mentioned, the straight line path forward is for Congress to prohibit it. We'll see a number of lawsuits, and one of the primary threshold issues will be who has standing to sue. You know, we've seen this issue crop up recently in the mifepristone cases that the Supreme Court has decided, where they had said, for instance, a couple terms ago, emergency room doctors who maybe might be called upon to treat a patient but can decline to do so, they're not sufficiently harmed by these laws to sue over them. Well, something similar will happen here, and the issue will be whether these officers have standing to sue. That's going to be problematic. There are a lot of smart lawyers out there working the problem, trying to figure out who has the best standing to sue. But it seems to me, you know, as a taxpayer, this money, the $1.776 billion that's being allocated for this, that's my money and your money. And although it's tough to manufacture a standing claim on that basis, it seems to me that there will be some way of moving forward with these cases.
Peter, when I heard about the $1.8 billion and we saw the number 2 person at the Treasury, while they didn't say why they were resigning, but basically immediately resign after this potential deal was announced, I said right here on this show, where's Jay Clayton? Where is Jay Clayton on this? Former SEC chair. He's now the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. I didn't have to ask where's Jay Clayton because he was on CNBC today. And he right there looked into the camera and defended the settlement of Trump's IRS lawsuit that resulted in the creation of this compensation fund. And I want to share for our audience, because they may have missed the interview, I want to share what he had to say.
I don't think we're going to be talking about this issue in a week because the American people are going to say, look, they leaked his tax returns. They tried to name and shame him. They tried to destroy him. Okay. We resolved that.
Who's they? Who's they, Jay Clayton? Because for fact's sake, Trump's tax returns were leaked in 2019 during his first term. The leaker, an IRS contractor. What happened to him? He was prosecuted by the Biden Justice Department and received the maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. Even the presiding judge was a Biden appointee. Peter, you know the president's circle as well as all of us. What happens to people in it that they say things like this. Jay Clayton knows he is running the Southern District of New York. He was chair of the SEC, and he looked right there into the camera and misinformed the American people. They named and shamed. Who's they, Jay Clayton? You know the truth.
Right. I'm glad you pointed out exactly what happened here, because you're right. It was the act of a lone contractor. He has been prosecuted for what he did, and he is paying the price for what he did. That doesn't mean, therefore, the rest of the taxpayers, therefore, have to take responsibility for his action. But that's what the president was arguing, in effect, that the agency itself should have to answer for this individual's actions. First of all, let's remind our viewers as well that what he did in leaking the president's tax returns was simply put the president on the same basis that every other modern president has been. Every other modern president voluntarily made his tax returns public because he thought it was important, or they thought it was important, that the public have an access to understanding of the president's personal finances. This is the only president since the Watergate era, basically, who refused to do it. So it's not like he was named and shamed in some way that other presidents weren't. The other presidents simply volunteered and did it themselves. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the IRS was responsible for the actions of this lone contractor. That still doesn't explain why the president gets to be off the hook for all past tax debts, penalties, interest on previous audits. This could save him $100 million. My colleagues estimated a couple of years back that on a particular audit that the IRS was known at the time to be conducting of the president, he could have to pay up to $100 million. Well, this is a very tangible thing that he's going to benefit from. And the second part is, he hasn't explained why the actions of this lone contractor would in any way justify giving $1.8 billion to people who attacked the Capitol, or other people who committed crimes or were accused of committing crimes or who were investigated for committing crimes, simply because they didn't like the fact that they were investigated.
Jay Clayton's right. People might not be talking about this next week, but it doesn't mean it's right. And what he said right there today was also incorrect. All right, Joyce, let's have a new topic. Today, judges in both Maine and Wisconsin dismiss the Department of Justice lawsuits that are demanding detailed state voter registration information. So far, 8 of these requests have been tossed out by judges. What is the DOJ up to? Like, why are they trying to push to get these voter rolls? Because it's not working.
Yeah, they're pushing because of politics, right? DOJ wants these rules for a number of reasons. There are some concerns that they'll be used to manufacture third-party challenges against voters, that DOJ itself might issue challenges against voters. Of course, we know that there's work underway because Trump issued an order trying to keep the Postal Service from mailing ballots to certain people if they don't appear on a national list that the White House wants to create. And they would use this data for that. So all sorts of bad conduct at stake in the administration's efforts to get these rules. You know, the judge's opinion in the Maine case is particularly instructive. He goes to pains to point out that he's dismissing the case at a very early stage where the only thing the government would have to do to survive and let the case move forward would be to come forward and make a statement that said, assuming all of the facts that the government recites in the complaint are true, that the government would be entitled to relief. And the judge says the government can't meet even that very low threshold. They simply haven't shown that they're entitled to this documentation in the first place. And so when Maine Secretary of State Shanna Bellows flat out refused to provide it, apparently she was correct. This is just, you know, the most recent in a herd of federal judges to refuse to force turnover of this information.
Susan, today we also got new polling out of Fox News that shows the president's disapproval rating has reached an all-time high, 61%. This is just the latest bad polling. What is your read on how the White House is receiving these reviews from the public?
Yeah, I mean, what's remarkable about it is that you would think, you know, any other political figure, when as much getting close to 2/3 of the American public disapproves of what you're doing, you're down to a third, you know, core supporters, what John McCain might have called, you know, friends and, you know, close family, and paid staff and close family. You know, Donald Trump only cares about that 1/3 core. And I think that's what's notable this week. We talked at the beginning about the sort of brewing rebellion among Senate Republicans. That's because Donald Trump has said, I choose toppling those of you who defy me with the third of the country that still cares about me and recognizes me as their leader, rather than any kind of effort to rescue the floundering Senate Republican majority or House Republican majority. This is an election year. You wouldn't know it from Donald Trump's efforts. He's not doing what another president might do, going around the country campaigning, seeking to boost up those sagging poll numbers. Basically, he's sort of saying, all I care about is control of the party. And I think the worry there is that Trump is, in a way, detaching himself from public opinion. He's essentially saying, I'm not constrained by public opinion. I'm no longer even trying to seek a majority of the public approving of my actions. What I'm going to do is govern for myself and a small and smaller group of people who are my followers.
And guess what? It's working for him. Look how much money he has made in the last 2 years, along with his closest allies. We have one more topic before I let you escape, Peter. Democrats. The Democratic National Committee released its so-called autopsy of 2024 after an enormous amount of pressure to do so. There was a lot in it, but there was also some glaring omissions. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Look, this is, this reminds me of the Republican autopsy after Mitt Romney lost. They had a lot of different ideas about how they should reconstitute the party. And then, of course, they adopted Donald Trump. So we don't know whether this is going to be meaningful or not. This is a party that is racked between its center left and its further left wings. And basically you see polling showing that people want the party, Democrats want the party to move a little bit more toward the center, but you've also seen a lot of results lately where in fact they're moving a little bit more to the left in certain districts and certain states. And I think that the fundamental conundrum in the party is that it has not really defined what it stands for. Now, that may not be a problem this year for the numbers, because the numbers you just talked about, right? It may be that opposition to Trump is more than enough to win a midterm election. People are so down on Trump that they may be willing to vote for Democrats whether they actually like him or not. But after the midterms, even if Democrats do succeed, the question is, how do they create a new identity? Now, they're going to need a leader to do that. They don't have a leader at the moment because they're in between, presidencies in effect. And somebody's going to have to emerge in the presidential primary process leading to 2028, who's going to have to tell the Democrats what it is they stand for, who they are, and what the appeal is to the American public that goes beyond simply rejecting Donald Trump.
Well, they have their work cut out for them. All right, gang, thank you for starting us off this evening. Coming up later in the show, Marco Rubio says he sees good signs an end to the Iran war could be near, but one huge sticking point has not gone away. We're going to ask Lieutenant General Mark Hertling if he thinks the real deal is in sight. But first, right after the break, this has had a serious challenge because, as usual, our commercial conversation beats the show. But let's try. Time for Money, Power, Politics. We're tracking a very big story tonight. You may have missed it. It's about big tobacco. According to the New York Times, new campaign finance filings reveal that tobacco giant Reynolds American donated $5 million to a Trump-backed super PAC last month. The Times reports just 2 days later, a top executive at Reynolds and two lobbyists who represent the company had lunch with Donald Trump at his golf club in Florida, according to three people briefed on the meeting who were not authorized to discuss it. And less than 1 week after that, the Trump administration rolled out a new policy the company had been hoping for that could allow major tobacco companies to sell flavored vapes. The Times points out there is no definitive evidence linking the new guidance to the lunch, the donation, or any specific lobbying. A spokesperson for the White House told the Times the following: the only guiding factor behind the Trump administration's health policy making is gold standard science. A spokesperson for MAGA Inc. said the super PAC is, quote, pleased to accept legal contributions from those who agree with with President Trump's America First agenda. Reynolds did not respond to a request for comment from the Times. Still, the situation has us asking the question again and again and again: is the White House for sale? Joining me now, Natasha Stern, former Treasury official and Yale law professor, and Brooke Masters, U.S. managing editor for the Financial Times. What is your reaction to this?
Flavored vape pens. As a mother of young children, I have to say, it's a little bit like tales old as time, kind of, money and politics and lobbying. But this combined with your last segment, Steph, and talking about the nature of the tax system being used to reward the president's political allies. And now we're talking about the idea that we're going to put flavored vapes in the hands of kids in a way that we know is detrimental to them and highly addictive. I don't know. It feels quite concerning.
You're not the only one who thinks that way, because just 4 days after the new guidance was announced, the FDA commissioner resigned, reportedly telling associates he could not in good conscience remain the head of an agency that backed such a policy. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you that McCary is the FDA commissioner who resigned, was in trouble for lots of other things and did not exactly have particularly high standards. But even for him, flavored vapes were too much. It's worth remembering that those vapes have been banned because of the Trump administration. They did the rule in 2019 that said you couldn't addict kids after there was incredible evidence that kids were getting sucked into vaping.
No pun intended. Natasha, there's a new topic here. The president today delayed signing an executive order on artificial intelligence that would have allowed the U.S. government to pre-evaluate the security of AI models. The Washington Post reports tonight that phone calls came in from AI leaders like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. These phone calls helped persuade Trump not to sign it. Their words to him, they warned him it could hurt AI development, which is at the heart of the U.S. economy right now. So let's just take a minute. Just a week ago, when we started to see the Trump administration push back on AI and the data centers a little bit, it was like, oh, maybe they're starting to listen to the American people. But boom, as soon as he gets close to signing executive order that would slightly slow things, these guys get on the horn and say, it's us versus China. Who do you want to win? Who do you want to win? And he presses pause.
And you know what I find is so striking about this, Steph, and I'm sure you've been reading the same reporting that I have, is kind of the volatility and chaos associated with this postponement. It wasn't that this is like a very measured and thoughtful set of policies that the administration considered. It was literally that you had executives mid-air flying to Washington today for the release of an executive order and then realizing that wasn't going to be happening. And so I think in and apart from exactly the nature of the importance of safeguards and guardrails around artificial intelligence, which are so first order, there is just this like uncertainty, chaos in the economy that's coming at each and every turn that I think has hugely detrimental consequences.
Brooke, we are on the cusp of multiple I need a bigger word than blockbuster public offerings. SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic. How much could this transform our economy, especially with so few guardrails and so much mega wealth in a tiny group of very, very powerful hands?
I think, obviously, if these models turn out to be as useful in displacing people, we could end up with a couple of trillionaires who have absolutely no controls on them. Because what's interesting, at least about SpaceX... Trillionaires, first of all. But SpaceX's IPO's filing, the S-1, says basically if you buy SpaceX stock, you have no rights whatsoever. Elon Musk controls it. You can't sue. You can't complain. He's got no fiduciary duty towards you. Basically, it's his company, and you're along for the ride.
Isn't that stunning? Because that's the one hiccup, right? For companies, when they have to go public, knowing they have to answer to shareholders, right? They have to act as a fiduciary. Shareholder lawsuits come up every day. And this is all that CEOs deal with. And in the case of SpaceX, it's like, it's truly, this is the house of Elon. You get what you get and you don't get upset. And he's going to get it.
And by the way, to this point, it's not just that he's going to get it. And again, this is a trend that's moving, but it's moving so far in the direction that unprecedented almost doesn't feel like a word that's big enough. But we're also in a situation where I think it's important for your viewers to understand the world's first trillionaire is something that is like highly consequential, not just because of the concentration of wealth that entails, but also because of what it means for political power in our system, and a system that is so ill-equipped, by the way, I'm a tax professor, from a tax perspective, to ever be able to meaningfully capture or have the fisc have any say with respect to the dollars that Elon Musk is going to make relative to the tax collections that we do for regular people. And you heard kind of Jeff Bezos say a version of this in his interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin this week. He thinks that billionaires are already paying their fair share with respect to taxes. I think that as you're in a situation where you're seeing more billionaires and trillionaires, we really need a tax system that's fit for purpose.
Damn. All right, one more topic. The bond market. The bond market is starting to flash warning signals. Why should Americans pay attention to this? Because most people don't. Even lots of people that are invested in the markets don't pay attention to this.
Well, the bond market's predicting inflation, basically is what it's saying, is that there is no way we can keep going at this rate of inflation. And what that means is higher interest rates, higher costs. So your mortgage is going to go up. Probably, maybe your wages will go up, but more likely, given AI, everything you have to buy will go up. And so it is an absolute warning sign that governments are spending beyond their means. And the bond market, which is the thing that ultimately funds the U.S. government, because, of course, we have a deficit, if bonds become more and more expensive for the government to issue, we're going to spend more of our tax dollars just paying interest on those bonds, and there will be nothing left to cover the things we want to do.
Already among the fastest growing parts of the federal budget is the interest that we pay on our outstanding debt. And by the way, the bond market might not be something that people pay that much attention to, but it really should be, because there's a sort of famous saying, you want to come back to life, James Carville said, as the bond market, because of its massive disciplining device. It's something that when at this time last year, which feels like now eons ago, you saw bond markets flaring signals around Liberation Day and those tariffs, that was something that the Trump administration felt that they had to respond to.
That's Trump's daddy. The only real guardrail. Trump's daddy is the bond market, bond investors.
So I hope he's paying attention, because they're really signaling some deep warning concerns.
What about the concerns of the divide that's only getting worse? Like, we talk about the political divide in this country. This economic divide is reaching almost panic status, right? We all just said it. You've got people that are going to make millions off Elon Musk's IPO. He's a trillionaire. Other potential trillionaires, while millions of Americans are locked out of home ownership with mortgage rates hitting a 9-month high. Can the United States sustain an economic divide like this for so much longer? I mean, in that same interview, Jeff Bezos was sort of blaming politicians for the American people being angry about the economic divide. That anger could topple us.
And just to be clear, I think that anger comes from the nature of the lives that the American people are living today, in that if you look at 93% of U.S. counties have seen housing costs outpace earnings over the course of the last 15 years. Housing is prohibitively expensive for people. It is like people don't even aspire anymore to ever be homeowners. People in my generation don't think that that's an attainable part of the American dream for them. The cost of childcare,
that was a core part of the American dream.
Yeah. All of it has kind of faded away. So, of course, people are rightfully frustrated by an economy that doesn't feel like it's working for them.
A core piece of the American dream, owning a home, is now considered a luxury at a time of trillionaires. This is America. Ladies, you guys know Money, Power, Politics is my favorite part of the show. Well, on the evenings when it's two women, it really is. When we come back, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, one of my favorite guests, is here on where things stand with Iran and what it will actually take to end it as the economic fallout continues here at home.